Hey, I'm that Stone Kid, the kid that brings you okay content sometimes, and today we're looking at the Marvel comic of Kick-Ass, written by Mark Millar and John Romita Jr. This is a great comic, and I'll explain why after a little bit of the story. So the story is about Dave Lazowski, aka Kick-Ass, when he becomes obsessed with comic books and he thinks being a superhero is the best thing in the world, but he's not doing it out of good intentions. He's just kind of doing it because arrogance, and he wants to be known. He wants to be known as a public figure and a social media phenomenon. So, like, he gets jacked, and he only lives with his dad. He doesn't have any other family. So he gets jacked, and then one night he decides to go out and be Kick-Ass. And this is what's really stupid. He fights a lot of battles of unimportance. Like, his first fight was with guys trying to spray paint a wall. Like, no one would care. Like, it's just kind of there. Like, no one ever sees that and thinks, I'm going to fight them. No. So he goes in there, spats a couple of slurs, and then he gets bodied. Absolutely bodied. He gets stabbed and beaten, and he doesn't really do anything else. But as he's walking away, a car hits him, and he's in the hospital for a good couple of months with broken legs, and he loses 85% of the feeling in his head. But, like, after all that, I think a sane person would literally just hang it up and not do it ever again, but he got the bright idea to do it again. So, eventually, he's going out and he fights 3 guys that are trying to beat a dude up. And then he becomes like a big phenomenon. Everyone knows who he is, and people are giving him calls to kind of go check people out and tell him to stop. Like, once, a girl named Lucille called him and told him to go over to her ex's house, Eddie Lomas, to stop him from calling her. So he does, but it can't just turn into, okay, man, stop, okay, leave. He doesn't stop, so then everyone pulls knives. And then he almost gets bodied, and then a little 10-year-old girl kills them all except Kick-Ass. 10 years old. 10. So eventually she leaves, and Kick-Ass follows her, and she meets up with her dad, Big Daddy, shown here. And they're both superheroes, but they don't have powers, and neither does David Lazowski. But, like, they kind of roll with it. And he's just kind of like, okay, then goes home, but he thinks he's being framed because he killed so many people. Not really, but Hit Girl did. Hit Girl is her name. And eventually he doesn't. It was under, like, gang activity, and they thought just people came up and shot them all. So eventually Big Daddy and Hit Girl come to see him, and it's just kind of like, we know what you've been doing, and either join us or not. And he doesn't. And he hears about this superhero named Red Mist, shown here. Red Mist doesn't have any superpowers either, except he smokes a lot of dope for some weird reason. And they kind of seem like cool guys, really cool. Red Mist got a really cool car. And Red Mist, it's the biggest twist of the story, and I'll explain later. But in a scene where they go see a burning building, and a girl screams that her baby Charlie is in there, well, I should say baby, it's not a human baby. And they decide to go in. Well, Kick-Ass does, and Red Mist follows. And they go in, and oh my god, Red Mist. Red Mist decides he wants to sneak out the back, but David doesn't let him. So showing that David is actually the braver superhero, even though he goes in with arrogance. And they find a cat. A cat! They risk their lives for a cat, not a human. So, like, they save them, and then they leave. They give their woman back their cat. So one night, Big Daddy, Hit Girl, Red Mist, and Kick-Ass decides to meet up at a warehouse. Red Mist goes with Kick-Ass, and Big Daddy and Hit Girl are there before them. So Kick-Ass goes in first, and Red Mist follows him. And they see Big Daddy bloody and beaten on the ground, nearly dead. And by the way, Big Daddy and Hit Girl use guns a lot, and Big Daddy always asks these weird questions. Not like weird in a sense, but it was like, what's Clint Eastwood's birth name? It's Clint Eastwood Jr. As they're on a mission or something. And, oh my god, this part's really sad. And then, Red Mist pulls a gun on Kick-Ass, showing that he was a traitor, because he is Chris Genovese, and his dad, John Genovese, is a really big-time mob boss. So he was just kind of like in cahoots with Kick-Ass to just get him and kill him. So eventually, after a while, and Kick-Ass trying to fight back, he is strapped to a chair, and they beat him with his hands will like, they just kind of electrocute him for a little bit, they waterboard him for a little bit, but after a while, oh my god, this part's brutal. They kill Big Daddy by capping him in the head right in front of Kick-Ass. And after that, he's like, come on, fight me with your hands, wuss bags. So they do. Then they beat him, and he breaks the chair, but he picks up the pieces and starts scrapping. And then, obviously, Hit Girl comes in and kills them all. And finds out her dad is dead, which is very sad for her, very hurting to her. But I like how this has a great amount of impact because Red Mist is seen as a cool guy with Kick-Ass, but with the traitor part of it, it really seems like Kick-Ass can't really trust anybody. And with Big Daddy dying, it's kind of like a hat on a hat. Not really like a hat on a hat, but it's just a lot to take in at once. And I wish they were spaced out a little bit more because it seems like they're just kind of throw a lot of stuff at you. So yeah, and then Red Mist and Kick-Ass have their huge fight where Kick-Ass absolutely bodies him. Red Mist barely does anything. And Red Mist and Hit Girl are going up an elevator. And she snorts some cocaine. A 10-year-old, her dad gave her cocaine. Oh my god. Father of the Year. Father of the Year. So yeah. And there's a big brawl, and they find out that Big Daddy had this really big silver case, and they don't know what's in it, and they want to know, so they're just kind of like torturing Hit Girl for a little bit, but she fights back, and they find out what's in it. It's a ton of old Marvel comics, so he was a fanboy too, and Big Daddy, before his death, explains that he was an accountant that twice hate him, so he took his little daughter, Mindy, and like had a new life with her, and he sold his old Marvel comics to fund everything they did. So, yeah. And also, another thing on Father of the Year, he trained his little girl how to take a bullet. He shot 10 bullets into her with a Kevlar vest. How? Why would you do that? So, yeah, eventually, Kick-Ass and Hit Girl defeat John Genovese. And, oh my god, she takes a meat cleaver and cuts his face off. It's really weird on how a 10-year-old could do that. Like, I don't think a 50-year-old could do that. But, it's a really good comic, and I'm going to talk about some of the characters. David is really impulsive and doesn't really work a lot, and he doesn't really think about any other people. And Hit Girl, you don't really know much about Hit Girl. You don't really know much about Big Daddy either. Don't really even know about Red Mist a lot. So it's just kind of like that. Just imagine being a mob boss, just like, tell me honestly that wouldn't happen. Imagine being beaten by a 10-year-old girl. That would actually suck. And the art style in this is very, very Marvel-like. It's what you'd expect from a new, modern Marvel comic. There was a movie about it. I haven't seen it because I wanted to save it for another video. But from my first impressions, it literally just seems like an adaptation. It's really nothing fancy. I think it's just an adaptation. So I don't really have high hopes. I really don't have high hopes for it. So I'm hoping to watch it and do another video on it. And there was a Kick-Ass 2 and 3. But I have Kick-Ass 2. I read it. I didn't want to do it for this video because I didn't want it to be too long. But I'm going to do that one eventually. So I'm that Stone Kid. Ha!